Hello, guys. Hello, Frederick, Freelance Mastery, Xavier, and Shauna. I'm going to allow some time for the stream to start here. Got 3 minutes. Hope you had a good week so far. Here we are on a Labor Day holiday. I'm still working. Thanks, Porter. So why don't we go ahead and get started, guys? Talk about how a caveman can set up Google local service ads. You know, speaking of Google local service ads, I saw the trend recently was to screw Google out of the commissions. People are answering the phone and then hanging up right away and then calling them back on another number. And I've had a whole bunch of people contact me trying to have me contact Google because I mentioned I have a line with Google, asking them to beg for their accounts back because Google's banning them. So they've definitely caught on to that. So I guess even a caveman can't keep their account, but for the most part, signing up is pretty easy. So Xavier, so you had asked here, why is Google making changes to people's account without any consent? No auto recommendations. I've heard that a couple times. I haven't personally seen it. Where you have to go into the settings and make sure all of the auto recommended auto apply settings are really turned off. If you do that, it really shouldn't automatically do anything. For the most part, they can't, because if they started doing stuff like that and then they automatically screwed something up to where you committed some sort of trademark violation or something like that, then they're going to be on the hook for it. So as much as they'd want to, I think that they're never going to be able to do it legally, logistically. Which is why they use Google reps to hound you to do stuff, because they want to be absolved of any liability from doing what stuff to your account. Hey Porter. Hey Parasang. Welcome to the chat. So you guys, who has the first question beyond what's already been asked? If you don't have any questions, I guess I'll talk about in general kind of what new stuff is going on that I see. The big thing is the AI search max, of course. I've had several people ask me about this already. I actually just made a video about this that I'm going to be releasing like this week. So essentially it's just rebranded broad match. Google's gotten in the position where they're trying to get to where you spend more money because they can't charge anymore for their ad space. So, and they want people to do broad match, but broad match has got a bad reputation kind of. And so they just simply rebranded it for the most part. So be aware of that. And the general trend has been them trying to push broad match, but not only that, but making exact and phrase match a lot more broad than it used to be. And every year it gets more and more broad in terms of how it operates. And, it keeps guys like me in business, because the average Joe that doesn't have time to manage their account meticulously every day almost is out in the cold and they can't make money from their ads. So the differentiation between people that make money and don't in most markets are going to be people who know how to get their ads to show up for the right things. And it's not adopting their new, way to rephrase some, broad match. Shauna, does your Google contact also have ability to ask about nonprofit grant accounts? Not really. And for that matter, I have only a little bit of experience with that in terms of, getting those to work. That I will say, though, there's a new technique that works great for Google grant accounts, given that, it's hard to get your money spent, which is to promote content and then have the content link to buying pages. So where typically most people will just try to run like a banner ad or like a billboard style Google ad on non-branded or non-buying searches, and then try to drive them to a sales page. It doesn't work real well because it's not what they're there for. You show up for non-competitive terms, people asking questions, you drive them to an article, the article answers a question, then refers them to a service or product in which then they will then buy. That's kind of the new trend that I've seen that works well. Freelance Mastery. Do you like call only ads? So I've made some videos about the differences between call only versus, driving people to a landing page. The short of it, again, is if you are in a market where people can quickly make a decision, the call only ads can be better. For instance, like towing services. It can be okay because people don't really need to think much about it. But even then, a non-call only campaign is still going to work better. There's a few markets where it'll work better, like such as if you're selling Allstate insurance, you're an Allstate insurance agent, and you just want to show up for people typing in Allstate insurance, a call only ad will work well because there's no evaluation going on. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of calls and they're not going to be very qualified at the very least. The average person that you want is somebody who goes to your website and investigates before calling, not just picking any random number off of Google and then calling it. So it could work if you're in the right niche, but it's very few. Less than 5% of the niches that I've ever operated in, call only will actually outperform the running people to a landing page. Parasang. People say riches are in the niches. What do you want to, what kind of a generalist? You want to be kind of a generalist instead of sticking to one niche and serving and automating that portion. So if you're referring to like the ad management space, I agree. It's easier to do niche business. So I just want to say real quickly, a lot of guys and gals, they try to go into a too competitive of niche when they're starting out, when they don't have a lot of money. You go super, super niche when you don't have much money because there's no competition or very low competition. People don't like to do that though, because the potential isn't as great, but you can always make money and then get into a different, more competitive, more mainstream niche later on. So you find a niche that fits your budget, so to say, and then work your way up to the niche where you can make the 10 million a year or whatever with the money that you made with the niche that you can only make 500,000 a year, even if you've done it all right, something like that. Yeah, they do suck, Shauna. Xavier, best way to increase expected CTR. Throw all the keywords inside the landing page using a JavaScript or keywords insertion. What's the best, works best, or is there a better way to go about doing this? See, that's kind of like the drawback with the, like dynamic headlines and so forth, because I mean, generally speaking, there's a middle ground with dynamic landing pages where you could have like a key system to where you could have a unique URL for every keyword. And therefore, if Google clicks on that ad to see what the landing page is like, it's going to get a static page and a predictable page versus literally one page for all keywords. That's where the keywords dynamically inserted. Bottom line, the fact that the keywords in the page several times in the URL, in the headline, H1, H2, sprinkled into the description text, that all affects your expected conversion rate or landing page experience, and also the CTR, expected CTR, somewhat. Mostly that has to do with the ad though. And so if you do a manual page, you will do better off on those two things. Now, that said, when you run your ads, the expected CTR and landing page experience isn't a factor after a short period of time after you've gotten some clicks. It really doesn't matter. So, to say that you want to use a manual page just to avoid that, it's really just, it's not much of a big deal, so to say. LLPP202. Would you recommend creating landing page specific YouTube videos that address customer FAQs, the service process, what makes your service better? Would you increase SEO visibility on LLM and Gemini? So it sounds like two questions here. So would you create landing page specific YouTube videos that address customer FAQs? Ultimately, I do a lot of that type of thing with remarketing more than anything. So your initial engagement or interaction with the user that you want to buy from you drives them to a general page that gives them a general overview. Then you want other ads to show up for them behind that go over specific things. What makes you different, you comparing you versus the competition, going over your warranty, all these things that would normally be selling points. You have an ad that mentions that selling point, drives them to a landing page that talks about that individual selling point, and it slowly educates the user over time on why you're so good. I use that technique all the time. It's just, obviously time consuming to put together, but from the consumer's perspective, you are following up in an intelligent way that helps them make a decision to buy. And the more informed they are, the more trust that you're going to have and the more sales you're going to get. So a lot of people just ignore the remarketing and they just think, I'm going to spend all my money going after a new person. And depending on what you're selling, that's a huge mistake, because when most people go to your site, when they're buying something even moderately expensive, they're not going to buy on the first visit. You got to do a process after that to actually close the sale. And we're talking even anything over like $100. The average person's not going to buy on the initial visit to the site. And so if you don't do follow-up, you're going to leave half the sales on the table that you could get. What landing page service do you, and your second question, I don't know too much about SEO and AI. I mean, I've dabbled with it some. It does work if you can trick the search engine into thinking it's not AI generated content, but I'm not going to try to spend too much time talking about that in particular. Shauna, what landing page service do you recommend? So I've used Unbounce for like 10 years now, and I still think it's the best one. Porter, on your recent demographics video, you spoke on how if you select an age requirement like 25 to 45, Google may not show your ads to everyone in that demographic, only like half of them. Can you elaborate? Essentially, you can single out these demographics and Google will take it kind of as a suggestion. They're still going to identify, if you at least use smart bidding, that is, which portion of that traffic actually converts and not. So, people that are within that age demographic, if they're on desktop and they're likely to convert on desktop, then it'll show. Or if they're not likely to convert on mobile, then it won't show. So it's not a harder, it's not like a definitive thing, so to say. I 100% recommend you use all those individual dimensions to steer, to filter your ads and all that. And the magic comes in when you have the age filter with the device filter, and you use all that to your advantage so that Google basically, when everything lines up, you got the perfect prospect. Parasan. So Google Ads experience with different niches like lead gen versus e-commerce or make you a better Google Ads strategist, or are they so different that you have to start from scratch with each with new client? Well, you honestly, yes, you'll get it much better as an ad strategist if you do a bunch of niches, because once you niche down, once you've done the strategy once, you basically are done. You don't really learn anything. You're just repeating the same strategy over and over again for all the companies in that niche. Whereas you have to actually be very, very, very intelligent to be able to get into a niche, make money, then right away go into another niche. Like, practically speaking, no offense to anybody watching this, but like this is the reason why I don't hire more strategists at our firms, given that we are a generalist firm, because the type of person who can do this on the fly, it's hard, because you got to have a wide breadth of different generalist knowledge about how products work, how the world works, and to be able to get into something quickly and then, make money with it right away to run the ads quickly. So of course, yes, you're going to be better doing it that way. Hi, Lifestyle Journal. Nice to see you here. Xavier, if you could share one secret sauce for lowering the cost per conversion, knowing it's directly tied to cost per click, what would be the strategy you'd use consistently to drive it down over time? Just like I mentioned a minute ago, you really want to drill down on the device level, age level, gender level, state level, city level, metro versus non-metro level, and then utilizing that to your advantage, because there'll be a string of those that actually line up with your customer. And you start knocking those out. Yes, it knocks down your volume, but it predictably is going to bring down your cost per conversion. Or you can just have smart bidding running long enough, and the system's kind of going to do the same thing, if you will. And then if you're talking about lead generation here, it's going to be simply doing offline conversion tracking, because it's going to weed out the poor quality leads and do it for you and do it better than also you're going to do it manually. So I could go on for a while about some other techniques, but that's like your number one strategy. It's just weeding out traffic that doesn't work. And then of course, keywords if you're doing search ads, but it's just really figuring out where the 10 to 20% where all the action is, and then and getting to it. It's really that simple. Maz, how do you create enhanced conversion leads for our CRM widget form, since Google Tag does not fire on it? I've made videos about this. You don't want to use the CRM form widget. It sucks. Basically, people want to use it, but it's just really, it's terrible. That said, if you had to use it, you could just make sure the form has a hidden field for the Google Click ID and try to get that ID on it, so that you can do an offline conversion import of the conversions you're getting on the back end. That'd be one way to get around it, but I really don't recommend doing that at all. I recommend having a regular form that's easy to track, using Zapier to send your data to your CRM, and doing things that way, because it tracks much easier. Parasang, are all the skills and knowledge transferable from one niche to another? Absolutely. And for that matter, why people will hire a generalist firm versus a niche firm, or should I say they'll hire you versus they'll hire a full-time employee that could come in and do their PPC. It's because you got all the outside knowledge. You come in having tried a strategy you're referring to them to use 50 other times in 50 other niches, and okay, it works, generally here, but not here. And that's just relevant to the user ultimately. Freelance Mastery. Do Google call only ads work for the move out cleaning services? I'll target a high intent exact match keyword and utilize manual CPC. Set my bids 20% higher for those on the top of the page bid. So I don't use it in that space. I'm in that space right now. It's still going to work better with a landing page if you know how to make landing pages well. If you don't, then I would say the call only ad is better. But generally speaking, you're going to make twice as much money figuring out how to do landing pages instead of just call only. Again, because they want to see at least the leads that you want, the really good prospects and the customers that are worth a lot of money. They want to see how your reputation is before they call itself. I mean, just think about it from your perspective. If you're going to hire a auto mechanic, do you really want to go to Google and just pick the first number you see there? Or are you going to go to their website, look at the reviews? Does the website look legitimate? You're going to do all this stuff before you call. I mean, this is just naturally how people operate. Brad, I'm offering bookkeeping and accounting services to small businesses. Average cost $400 a month for ongoing services. Do you think it would be reasonable to have a CAC of $1,200 or less using Google CPC? Absolutely. I've operated in that space before. You can generate leads for $100 or so. Now I know you're talking probably about so you said even small businesses, but even then it should be only a couple $100 a lead, and you should be able to close at least 20% of those. So absolutely. Will it be substantially less than that? Well, over time your ads will get more and more optimized if you use qualified lead tracking and you feed in the leads that are closing into your ad account so that the ad account can weed out the bad quality leads. And I would say certainly you should be able to get it down to 500 in that range. Brad, I know there may be too many factors to answer that question. So just as a follow-up, I'd still stick with my opinion there. Porter, with search ads, can I use a custom intent audience to do the demographic adjustments and a website to filter traffic, or is this limited to display ads? You can use the demographic adjustments itself on search ads and display ads. There's absolutely no reason why you can't do that itself. And and if you could go further, you could do audience level adjustments on display and search ads as well if you use manual bidding. I don't typically do that, but that's something else to look into as well. Hi, Alex. Xavier, is it possible to trick Google Ads conversion tracking, fooling Google into treating some actions as low value conversion so it optimizes differently? If yes, what hacks have you tried? So I've seen some people tell me, that's other like ad managers and affiliate marketers and stuff, tell me they've tried different variations of, sending Google less data itself, and so forth. But for the most part, it looks like it doesn't really help you much at the end of the day. Now, I've mentioned on videos before how if Google sees you're doing too well, they'll sneak in bad traffic on you, which is why you always got to have your targets. That is what you're willing to pay per conversion or ROAS higher than what you're getting, so they don't do that to you. But to try to mess with the metrics, itself, if you're talking about like actually changing the data, that's not helpful. Absolutely, for the lower value conversions, you want to add I mentioned on my channel before how you can add lower conversion value for the lower quality conversions, so that ultimately you could see, for instance, what are the percentage of people who turn into a lead that turn into a sale, and then you can divide the average revenue by the number of leads and get your, like an average value per lead versus an average value per qualified lead, and then have different values for each, so that when you use maximize conversion value bidding strategy, they're going to optimize more so for the qualified lead than the just a lead by itself. So that absolutely does increase your profitability from your account itself. And but more so, what I do is make sure I optimize using all of the individual steps that lead up to a sale until I get enough sales data to where I only have that sales goal primary. Because at a certain point, 100 plus sales conversions, it doesn't make any sense to optimize for the other lesser conversion goals, because it's not really going to help the algorithm that much. And we just want them to optimize for sales. So those other goals are useful at the beginning only, for the most part. Alex, how can you estimate the result of, I'm not quite sure, obviously, what you were referring to there. Parasang, again, do you have any mental models you use day to day for Google Ads and for strategy in general. So, I mean, basically for ad copywriting, it's the AIDA model, AIDA itself. I know that's not exactly a mental model per se, but the number one thing to just keep in mind, the golden rule, is to figure out what the user wants to hear and don't take shortcuts in explaining what they want to hear back to them, because the more you do that, the less money you ultimately make. And if you don't know what they want to hear, you go and you read literally all your competitors' reviews, every single one, make a list of all the stuff they're complaining about, what they like, what they don't like, then start writing your ad copy, then start making your landing pages. Because then you don't have to guess what they want to hear anymore. You absolutely know what they want to hear. And even if you're a bad copywriter, you're still going to have a pretty darn good campaign because you actually took the time to listen to what they actually want to hear. And of course, some of the stuff you can't deliver on, but even then, instead of just trying to get around it, why not try to figure out how to work that into your product or service somehow also at the end of the day? And if you do that, you're basically going to be able to win by default, because most people really don't put that much attention into their campaigns. And you're just going to, it's the key to get anybody to like you, right? That, you listen to what they have to say and you make them feel heard, and people are going to like you. And as it comes to getting people to respond to your advertising campaigns, it's the same exact thing. Alex, hi, I hope stuff with Aaron going well. So far, nothing is happening yet, but how do you estimate the results of the company? If you need to tell if you can reach a certain ROAS on an account with a certain growth. So if you're talking about so before you get into something, knowing how it's going to do, that kind of thing, I literally, for every client that I'm going to work with, I do an 8-quarter projection for them in advance, mainly because I want the client, if they're going to work with me, to be on reasonable ground. I want them to not have unrealistic expectations. And then if I waste my time, so to say, working for them, and I get them what's normal to get in that market, then we're not going to get into it. And 3 months later, they're going to say, oh, I thought we were going to get this. And then I just wasted my time. I could have found a better client. So I've had to do a lot of this over the years, and I've done this for a good 10 years now like that. And over time, essentially if you're just talking about regular like Google search ads, the high end of the range on the Google Keyword Planner is where you're going to start out, and the low end of the range is going to be where it's going to be eventually. And that process, takes months, a year to walk that cost per click down. And until it's walked down, you a lot of times won't make any money. So I put that into the spreadsheet, and I assume it's going to be walked down. The conversion rate's going to increase over time because you're going to weed out bad traffic. And those two things are the main levers that make your campaign more profitable. And I just kind of know the rate in which we typically are going to improve the conversion rate and the rate in which we're going to reduce the cost per click. And then I can predict a point of profitability and then how it's going to scale up from there and so forth. In terms of scaling, you can look at how much search volume there is in a space and then identify how big a market is going to be, through and with that. Along with that, if you're talking about display campaigns, Facebook, stuff like this, it's harder. The easiest thing to do is honestly, as gray as this is, it's literally to reach out to the company that you in a market that you want to enter, and you start asking them questions, pretending like you're an investor or a customer, and ask how much sales they got, and then use it to identify if you want to go into that market or not. You'd be surprised what you could find out by doing these kind of things and see how much money they're making. And then you don't have to guess whether you want to get into that market or not. I mean, obviously it's a little bit unethical, but hey, business is war, and they'll sacrifice the information. Then you at least know what you're getting into. So if an account reaches 8 ROAS with 20% growth year over year, how would you think about making sure if the goal is real? It's tough. It's just one of those kind of things also you see with experience. I can compare one market with another similar market, and I can kind of see what's going to go on. Beyond what I said, it's tough. It really is tough. I mean, for the most part, you just got to find somebody with experience if you want that kind of in-depth knowledge as to what is actually going to happen. It's not something I can give you a formula, exactly do this. You'll know exactly if this is going to be the case or not, unfortunately, Alex. Xavier, when you take over an account, what is your process for making it better? Which parts of the marketing model do you hit first and which last? What's the priority list that you personally follow? So ultimately, unfortunately, most accounts that I take over, the account set up like absolute crap. And it's like a rat's nest. It's like if you were to rewire a house and the person did it before you, and they just had a bunch of wires everywhere. It's like you try to do your best to try to make it better, but like it's very hard to make a campaign better that has no definitive structure to it. And I mean, I want to use the old campaigns because it's much easier to get results with, but 80% of the time we're stuck with just making new campaigns. And with that said, whether even you're talking about like Google or Facebook, you're better off starting new campaigns so that their current results, that is, if they're relying on them at all, are not going to be affected. And you just run them along with the old campaigns. And then hopefully the new campaigns get scaled up fairly quickly. So you can then eventually run only them. That's what my protocol is 80+% of the time. Other than, going through what they're doing with the old campaigns and trying to find stuff that's got waste in there, whether it's adding negative keywords, getting rid of keywords, getting rid of audiences, and ultimately get rid of all the waste. And then once I got rid of all the waste, then maybe I put some new ad copy together for that old campaign. Other than that, I'm going to then focus on the new campaigns and with the perfect structure and perfect setup so that I don't screw up the old campaign's results, so to say. And because I can set it up the way that I know gets the best results ultimately. Because once you start unraveling that old campaign, it's going to unravel the results. It's hard to make major changes on an old campaign and maintain the results, which is why we go with the new campaign structure typically to eventually replace what's there. Zalo, what is your thinking process on starting with long tail broad match versus exact match for new accounts? So long tail broad match is kind of an oxymoron, right? Because Google's not going to really care what the keyword is. Broad is so broad now. So for that matter, I've always kind of said on my channel that you always start out with exact match until you know that it's not going to cut it, because at least then you're not going to blow up your budget right away and you're out of money and you're out of the game. If you know you need more than that, then you could go with phrase match. And if you need, that won't cut it in terms of spending your money, then you could go broad match. Versus going broad right away, maybe it works right away, but probably you just waste your whole money right away in 2 seconds and then you're just out of the game. So I never basically ever use broad match at the beginning. I eventually will bring broad match in when I can't make any more money on exact and phrase match as like a last, like icing on the cake. And it's on a separate campaign with a small budget that's well controlled for a while because I know it runs so broad. And eventually maybe I can add another 10-20% to my bottom line, having broad match and scaling that up with the exact and phrase, because I actually do the proper keyword research to target all the exact match terms that I should target, which is where people go wrong with it. They say, I'll do broad match because it gets more clicks. Well, if you would have just did the proper research to find the 500 different ways people search for keywords and search in your market, you didn't need broad match to begin with. Okay, so we're already at 30 minutes here, guys. I'll go a little bit longer just because I'm kind of in the mood for it. And then I have an announcement that I wanted to make here. Parasang. So for e-commerce clients, do you do a rev share deal, or have you ever done so? if so, could you give some numbers if you were able to generate? So I've done several of these actually. And if you're going to do revenue share, basically the only way it works is, in my opinion, is e-commerce. Lead generation businesses, unfortunately, people, when you get them results, they say they're happy to pay you. When you get them the results and they're doing all the work and you're doing nothing, presumably in their eyes, them willing to pay you, it's a different story. And they'll try to hide revenue and hide profit from you. That's just human nature, I guess. But if you're doing e-commerce and you have access to the e-commerce platform, then it's hard to obviously hide anything, and that keeps them quote unquote honest, so to say. So that said, it's anywhere between 1 and 10% of the overall revenue, and you want to do the overall revenue. Don't let them pay you 2% of what the PPC sales are, because the PPC tracking doesn't track everything. And you get a customer, they buy again, then you get no benefit from that. You run PPC, that helps get organic rankings. That benefits them, you get none of that. Somebody buys, refers somebody, that helps them, doesn't help you at all. Realistically, the PPC is the backbone of the business. You scale up the PPC, everything comes up. Not to mention, when they eventually sell the company, you want a piece of it. So you also want equity. So we'll do like 4% equity, 4% total revenue share increase on top of any revenue that they have now. So if you're doing $1 million a year now, we don't touch that. Anything in excess that we grow you to, it's 4% is our cut. And that's how we do it essentially. So, and for that matter, we do an earn in though too, to make it fair. So until, if the company's worth $1 million, for that 4%, the first 40,000, we won't take anything. Once we're past 40,000 in commissions, we'll start getting our cut. And so we're basically buying our way into the company through the commissions that we're going to get. Hey, Kevin, where do you get your stylish shirts and ties? You can't, if you have to ask, you can't afford them, bro. Alex, so is there no way to guess what we can get through at least a few months to say a client we're going to have? Of course, I can just take benchmarks. Again, I wish there was a way, like if there was a way to answer your question, I would just put together a AI that would just automatically somebody on my site that wanted to get results and get a guaranteed result, they would just answer some questions and then boom, it would spit out and say, I can get you this. Here's what we'll guarantee, but that's impossible. I've got to really think about everything, the competition of the market and the person's value proposition. Are they offering warranty? Are they not? Is the competitor off? It's just like, there's so many factors. It's hard to do that. Kevin, with small accounts, like 20, 30 bucks a day is the best strategy. Exact much skag, or can you do 4 to 5 ad groups in stag? So to be honest, stag anymore is still pretty good. Is skag going to do better? Yes, it is. So what a lot of guys will do is they'll do stag at the beginning. And then once that's kind of plateaued out in terms of the results you can get with it, then they'll add stag to the setup. And that can be a perfectly fine thing you do. And it also will scale up quicker because you're going to build up quality scores on your keywords quicker with less keywords in there that you have and that you need kind of per se, and less ad groups. So that is something I would say. And for that matter, though, with that small micro kind of budget, I would still do stag or skag. I would just have less keywords. So I would, instead of targeting 500 keywords like I normally would in a niche, I would target 5 or 10. And then when that makes money, I'm going to do 5 or 10 more and then keep going up, because it's going to concentrate your spend on a smaller set of keywords, which racks up your quality scores quicker. And you're going to get to initial profitability quicker that way. D's. How and when do you scale the number of keywords? given that you started with 10 near me keywords in SCAG campaign each. Also, which type of keywords will you add next? As soon as I'm profitable, I'm adding more keywords to keep it short. I mean, really, it doesn't get more complicated than that. I mean, of course, if you're working with the client, you have to convince them to spend more money, which you would think, hey, if you're making money, why would you want to spend more? Sometimes clients are hard-headed like that, but it's really that simple. Porter, starting a new ad account just for recruiting new hires. Our current ad account drives traffic to our site. Will I mess up the current account if the new account uses a landing page on the same site? Technically, if you're targeting the same keywords, that I wouldn't, on the same domain, I wouldn't do that itself. I would have a separate domain, separate ad account. So, but if ultimately it's different keywords, that's certainly fair game. There's no problem. Alex, when you have a small budget, for example, 2K, I know that you should have one campaign, but does having a lot of ad groups slow down optimization? Yeah, I mean, it does initially, like I was mentioning just a second ago, which is part of the drawback of having all those ad groups to begin with. The upside is it's huge once you get some initial minimum data on your campaign. But up front, it's actually better to have less ad groups, actually. For me, I'm not thinking about, it all depends on your situation. If you're in a situation where you have a tiny bit of money and they got to get it to work, you have like one or two keywords even, and you make that make sense first or make it work first. Versus if you don't need an instant return like that, then, I'm going to do more keywords. I mean, really, it kind of is that simple. Kevin, how important are customer lists prior to starting a campaign? I recently started those campaigns for a med spa, but then realized we have a great list out of Wix. Should I add now? How important is it? It's hard to kind of quantify exactly or put to terms this. It's certainly also going to vary by niche, but it certainly helps out quite a bit. At least when you're talking about a sizable customer list. If you have a customer list of only like a couple hundred people, it's negligible what it will actually do for you. If you've got a customer list of 10,000, it'll help substantially. So you absolutely are crazy if you don't upload your customer list. And I've talked about how before you need to segment your customer list even so that people who want the vampire facial versus the PRP treatment, whatever, you need to have different lists so that those lists can be added to different campaigns, that kind of thing, assuming you have enough ad spend to do that, which you got to, like a $50,000 lifetime spend to do that. But that's a very effective strategy in and itself. And for e-commerce, the customer lists help tremendously as well. When you add the product specific lists to the campaigns that promote just those individual products, it actually helps a lot. So, and almost nobody does that. Okay, so I'll do one more. Sam, when creating remarketing audiences in Google Analytics, what's the ideal number of days to set for audiences who visited the site? That depends on the situation. I want to say, so what I do to determine how far out I'm going to go is dependent on, more than anything else, the cost of the product or service that we're promoting, because that increases this average sales cycle window length. So if we're selling a $20 broom, for instance, that people are either going to buy probably the same day or nothing, then I'm going to do 7 days and pretty much that's it. Versus if I'm selling a mobile home for $100,000, then I'm going to do the maximum of 540 itself. And for that matter, what I recommend to do is to have the 540 audience anyway, and you have it on the back burner so that it's ready to deploy at any time. And then I'll do a campaign with 730, 60, 90, 180, 365, 540, and I'll put them into the ad group. And then at least then I can see which ones perform good versus which ones perform not good. And then I can get rid of the ones that don't perform good necessarily. So if I'm questioning it at all, I'll just do all of the above, so to say. Unless, of course, it's a very inexpensive buy or decision or whatever that they're making. And then in that case, I'll limit it initially down to just, let's say, 90 days instead of the full 540. But you got to keep in mind, again, going back full circle on what I mentioned earlier on in this video, the average person doesn't make a decision right away. People think, like, I've even had clients that came to me and said, why are we only getting 5 or so % of people here that are interested in our custom furniture that we're offering? It's like, people don't make a decision to buy the first time they search something. That's not normal. You really are marketing to most people so that they, when they're doing their research, and later on that they're going to buy, that you're in the running ultimately. Now, you don't want to make that as an excuse to not get results, but that's generally speaking the way that it works. Unless it's an emergency decision, like you need an emergency plumber, or ultimately it is the $20 broom that you just have to go online to buy, and that's it. So the money is really made, and especially with expensive items, in the remarketing. We, for the companies that I'm in part investor in, I've got remarketing sequences 20 deep, 30 deep. You got in terms of different ads that pitch different individual reasons of why we're better, how we're better, how our warranty works, and driving them to our dedicated pages on our site talking about this stuff because it matters. And it's, there's only so many people in market ready to buy. And if you're not going to remarket to them, you're just you're leaving half of the money on the table. And ultimately, when you try to scale past a certain point, you're going to fail without the remarketing going, because that's really what makes the difference. And somebody that's not even really in market for the product, in order to sell to them, you need an actual funnel at the end of the day. But it makes any even person that's just typing in buy custom furniture to, makes it twice as productive as well. If you do the remarketing, super solid. Anyway, like I mentioned, I think that'll make that the last one I'm going to do here. I'm going to, like I mentioned on my first one, Q&A here that I did last week, that I'm going to start doing these Q&As at the same time every week. And so if you didn't get your questions answered today that you'd like to have asked, you can come back next week at the same time and ask them. Basically, probably will get them answered on that one. But I mentioned that I had an announcement here. So I had one user who talk like a caveman. I had one person that had commented on my previous live stream Q&A here that I should consider doing or thinking about doing a actual paid version of this Q&A session that would happen, where there would be less people and a small membership. And then, in that it'd be a longer Q&A. We would do a lot more, in terms of live optimization, looking at stuff. And then I was ultimately planning on also sharing some of the past campaigns that we've ran on those. So in other words, do a private group where our winning campaigns that we are running, that we find work, that we would share that on a private group, that material's reviewable, and we're going to do weekly Q&As, and they're going to be an hour instead of 30 minutes in length. And we would have like a monthly membership fee for all of the above. So I'm curious if anybody else might be interested in this in terms of like what we would charge and so forth. I was thinking we would charge something like $50 a week for all of that information, which we would have different, if you're a e-commerce business, you're going to see examples from e-commerce campaigns that we've ran, the type of campaigns that we ran, how they're structured, so on and so forth. Whereas if you're local service, then we would have stuff that like that sectioned off that you're going to be able to review and so forth. But anyway, I'm just was wondering about that. Otherwise, we'll just keep doing this thing as is. But obviously, as it grows, I can only answer so many questions, and then that's it. So I don't know if anybody was interested in that type of thing. If you are interested, I'd be happy to hear from you, or tips or anything like that you would think that in terms of a membership that I could offer that might be better or more useful or whatever. So if you have something like that, you can reach out to me through the comments on any one of my videos, or you can reach out to me on my site. But for now, I'm just going to keep doing these weekly Q&As. And so hopefully you'll come back next week. You have questions, and I'll be here to answer them. All right. Thank you very much. See you guys later. Welcome, Sam.